Part 2, the billionaire caught his fiancée forcing the maid and her toddler to clean the floor. What happened next was unbelievable. She was gone. The mansion was warm again. Clara was laughing again. And Isabella, for the first time in years, had stopped flinching every time she heard heels on marble. Adrian had chosen them. Said it out loud. Your family now. And they believed him. But here's what nobody tells you about happiness when you've lived without it for too long. Sometimes the moment you finally feel safe, that's exactly when the storm comes back. Because Vanessa Duca didn't just leave that morning with her 2 suitcases and her practiced dignity. She left with a plan. And 3 months later, on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning, Isabella's phone lit up with a headline that made her blood run cold. Billionaire Adrian Cole manipulated by gold-digging Maid. Sources close to the family speak out. Clara was eating breakfast when Isabella read it, humming to herself, wearing Adrian's old college sweatshirt that she'd claimed as her own 2 weeks ago. She had no idea that somewhere across the city, someone was trying to burn everything they'd built, down to the ground. This is part 2. And if you haven't seen part 1 yet, please go to the description, click the link, and watch it first. Because what's coming next will break your heart before it puts it back together. Before we begin, I want to take just a moment because this channel has grown into something truly beautiful. People from all over the world come here every single day to feel something real. To hear stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Stories about kindness, about dignity, about love that shows up quietly and changes everything. And I want to know, where are you watching from right now? Are you in the United States, maybe sitting with a morning coffee before the day starts? Are you in the United Kingdom, maybe catching this on your lunch break? Are you in Canada or Australia, watching this late at night when the house is finally quiet? Are you in India or Germany or somewhere else entirely, somewhere I haven't even mentioned? Drop your country in the comments right now. Just your country, nothing else. You'll be amazed how many people from how many different corners of this world are sitting exactly where you are, feeling exactly what you feel, needing exactly this kind of story today. We are more connected than we know. Now let's get back to Isabella, to Clara, to Adrian, and to the woman who thought losing gracefully was optional. The morning it happened was the kind of morning that had no right to carry bad news. It was a Tuesday in late September, and the Cole estate had slipped into autumn the way Clara approached most things she loved, completely and without reservation. The maple tree near the east garden wall had turned a deep, burning amber overnight, and Clara had stood at the kitchen window for a full 4 minutes that morning just staring at it, her cereal going soft in the bowl behind her, her small face wearing the particular expression she reserved for things she found almost too beautiful to process. "Mama," she'd said finally, without turning around. The tree changed its outfit. Isabella had laughed, leaning over to look. "It does that every year." "Does it know it's pretty?" "I think that's why it does it." Clara had accepted this with a satisfied nod and returned to her cereal. It was 7:42 in the morning. The kitchen smelled like Rosa's cinnamon toast and fresh coffee. Adrian had already left for the city, an early board meeting, but he'd stopped in the kitchen doorway at 6:30 on his way out, like he always did now, to check on them. "Big day?" he'd asked. Tree changed its outfit. Clara had informed him seriously. He'd looked at the maple, nodded like she'd given him a weather report, and said, "Noted. I'll look when I get back." "You better," Clara had said. He'd smiled at Isabella over Clara's head, that quiet, private smile that had started somewhere around May and hadn't stopped, and then he was gone. That was 7:14. At 7:51, Isabella's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She almost didn't pick it up. She was refilling her coffee, half watching Clara negotiate with Rosa about whether cinnamon toast counted as a vegetable if the cinnamon came from a tree. It was a Thursday morning argument that had migrated to Tuesday without anyone noticing. She picked up her phone the way you do when you're not really paying attention, the way you do when you have no reason yet to be afraid. The notification was from a news app she'd downloaded months ago and mostly forgotten about. A celebrity gossip feed, the kind that ran headlines about people in Adrian's world, people with names and addresses in the same tax bracket. The headline read, Billionaire Adrian Cole's sudden split from socialite fiancée Vanessa Duca raises eyebrows. Sources say live-in maid may have played a role. Isabella read it once. Then again. Then a third time, the way you read something when your brain keeps insisting it must have gotten it wrong. She set her coffee down. Rosa was still talking about cinnamon. Clara had escalated her argument to include the point that maple syrup also came from a tree, and that trees were basically a food group. The kitchen was exactly as warm and bright as it had been 30 seconds ago. Isabella clicked the article. It had been published 40 minutes ago. It already had over 2,000 comments. The article was careful in the way that really damaging things are careful. It didn't say anything outright. It didn't have to. It was written in the language of implication, of sources close to the family, and those who know Adrian well have expressed concern, and questions are being raised about the nature of the relationship between Cole and the woman employed in his home. There was a photo of Adrian leaving his city office building, taken from a distance. There was a photo of Isabella that she didn't recognize at first, and then she did with a jolt because it was from a local community event she'd attended with Clara 8 months ago. Before any of this, before everything. Someone had found it. Someone had looked. The article described her as a live-in domestic worker with a young child who had inserted herself into the billionaire's personal life following the abrupt end of his high-profile engagement. It described Vanessa as a devastated former fiancé who had dedicated months to building a life with Cole before being blindsided. It quoted a source, unnamed, always unnamed, who said Adrian had been clearly influenced by the situation at home. That people in his circle were worried. That the whole thing had happened very fast. It was 700 words long and contained 0 facts and infinite damage. Isabella's hands were steady. She noticed this about herself with a kind of distant surprise. She'd expected them to shake. She read the comments for exactly 90 seconds before she stopped. Gold digger. That one appeared 11 times in the first 30 comments. She counted without meaning to. Poor Vanessa. 8 times. Of course she targeted a rich man. 6. That poor child being used as a pawn. That one she had to put the phone down for. She set it face down on the counter. Looked out the window at the amber maple tree. Clara's tree, with its changed outfit. She took one long breath, and then another. Mama? She turned. Clara was watching her from the kitchen table, cereal spoon suspended midair, head tilted at the angle she used when she was reading a room. She was frighteningly good at reading rooms for someone who was 3.5. Are you okay? Clara asked. I'm okay, Bug, Isabella said. Clara studied her for another moment with those dark, serious eyes. Then she said, Rosa says when something feels bad, you should eat something warm. Rosa's right, Isabella said. I'll share my toast, Clara offered, pushing her plate a fraction of an inch across the table in Isabella's direction, the international gesture of a child offering the most valuable thing they possess. Isabella walked to the table. Sat down. Took a piece of toast. Across the city, Adrian's board meeting was already underway. He didn't know yet. And somewhere in a penthouse apartment on the 52nd floor of a building downtown, Vanessa Duca was sitting with her own coffee, her own phone, watching the comment count climb. She had not smiled this way in months. Adrian found out at 9:17 a.m. Not from Isabella. Not from a news alert. From his COO, Daniel Marsh, who had been with Cole Enterprises for 11 years and had a talent for delivering bad news with the calm efficiency of a surgeon. Fast, clean, no unnecessary drama. Daniel walked into the conference room between the 3rd and 4th agenda items, leaned down, and placed his phone on the table in front of Adrian, without a word. Adrian read the headline. Read the article. Set the phone down. The 4 board members sitting across the table watched his face, with varying degrees of discretion. 2 of them had already seen it. He could tell from the particular quality of their silence, the kind that comes from people who have opinions they're deciding whether to offer. "We'll take a 10-minute break," Adrian said. His voice was completely level. In the hallway outside the conference room, he called Isabella. She picked up on the second ring. "I saw it," she said. No greeting. No preamble. Her voice was steady in a way that told him she'd been holding it steady for a while already. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. Clara doesn't know. I'd like to keep it that way." "Absolutely." A pause. "Isabella." "Don't apologize," she said quietly. "Not yet. Not for this." He was quiet for a moment. Outside the conference room window, the city moved in its ordinary Tuesday way. Taxis, pedestrians, the distant geometry of other people's lives running on other people's schedules.
"She planned this," he said.
It wasn't a question. "I know. The timing. The photo of you from that community event, someone had to find that deliberately. Someone had to give it to them." "I know, Adrian." He exhaled slowly. "I'm going to handle this."
A beat.
Then Isabella said something that stopped him completely. "Before you do, I need you to think about what handling it costs you. Your company. Your board. I have a daughter. I can't be the reason."
"Stop," he said.
Gently but clearly. "Stop right there. I'm serious." "So am I."
He paused.
"Do you remember what you told me? Back in May? When I said I thought I'd burned out the part that feels things?" A long silence. "You said the part was working fine," Isabella said softly. "You just needed the right thing in front of it."
"Yeah," he said.
"So, do me a favor and trust that I know what the right thing is." She didn't answer immediately. He waited. "Okay," she said finally. Their word. Simple and load-bearing as ever. He went back into the conference room. The board members rearranged their expressions into various versions of professional neutrality. Harold Griffith, the oldest member of the board and a man who had known Adrian's father, cleared his throat. "Adrian, I think we should discuss." "We will," Adrian said, sitting back down. "After we finish the agenda. The optics of this situation." "Harold." Adrian looked at him directly. "We will finish the agenda. Then we will discuss whatever needs discussing. In that order." Harold closed his mouth. They finished the agenda. When the last item was done, Adrian set down his pen, leaned back in his chair, and looked at the four people across the table. "I know what the article says," he began. "I know where it came from, and I want to be very clear with each of you before this goes any further." He looked at them one by one.
Slowly.
The way he looked at things when he needed them to understand he was serious. "Isabella Reyes has worked in my home for over 2 years. She is one of the most competent, honest, and decent people I have encountered in my professional or personal life. Her daughter is 3 years old and is the reason I ended my engagement, not because of anything improper but because of what I saw Vanessa doing to that child. That is the complete truth of the matter." The room was very quiet. "This article exists because my former fiancé is angry and has resources and made a calculated decision to use them. I understand how this business works. I understand optics." A pause. "I am telling you now, directly, that I will not be making any decisions about my personal life based on what makes a better headline. If that concerns any of you from a board perspective, I'm happy to have that conversation individually." He picked up his pen again. "Are there any questions?" Silence. Then Margaret Chin, the youngest board member and the one Adrian had always privately trusted most, said simply, "No questions from me." One by one, the others followed. Harold Griffith was last. He looked at Adrian for a long moment, the considering look of a man recalibrating, and then nodded once. "No questions," he said. After they filed out, Daniel stayed behind. He retrieved his phone from the table, pocketed it, and paused at the door. "For what it's worth," Daniel said, "I've met Isabella at the charity dinner last June. She spent 20 minutes talking to my wife about Hartford, because that's where Sarah grew up." He paused. "She's good people, Adrian." "I know," Adrian said. The article won't hold up, Daniel said. There's nothing there. No, Adrian agreed. There isn't. Daniel left. Adrian sat alone in the conference room for exactly 4 minutes, looking out at the city, thinking about a kitchen table and mismatched candles and a little girl who had tilted her head at a maple tree this morning and said it changed its outfit. Then he picked up his phone and made a second call.
Not to his PR team.
Not to his lawyer. To Marcus. I need you to find out, he said quietly, exactly who gave that photo to the press. Vanessa Duca had not become the woman she was by accident. She had built herself the way architects build buildings, deliberately, load by load, floor by floor, with a very clear picture of what the finished thing should look like from the outside. She had grown up in a household that was comfortable but not wealthy, in a suburb of Boston where the difference between the two felt enormous and constant and quietly humiliating. Her mother had worked in hotel management. Her father had sold insurance. They were fine people. They loved her. They had no idea what she saw when she looked out her childhood bedroom window and understood, with a clarity unusual in a 12-year-old, that the life she wanted was on the other side of a very specific kind of effort. She had been strategic every step of the way. The right college, the right internships, the right social circles, cultivated with patience and precision. She was not cruel by nature. She wanted to believe that even now. She simply understood that the world sorted people into categories, and she had made a decision very early, never to be in the wrong one. Adrian had seemed like the final step. Not because she didn't care for him, she did in her way. But the way she cared for things had always been slightly entangled with what they represented. It was hard to say where one ended and the other began. She had not expected him to choose a maid. Not the maid herself, perhaps. She was intelligent enough to know that this was more complicated than that. She had seen the way Adrian looked at Isabella, had seen it and dismissed it, because she had made the category error of believing that a man like Adrian would always, ultimately, choose the woman who matched his world on paper. She had been wrong. The realization had arrived not gradually, but all at once. Standing in the marble hallway with her suitcases while Marcus held the front door, and Adrian had turned his back on her completely to crouch down beside a 3-year-old in an oversized suit jacket. She had left with her composure intact. That much she had managed. But composure is not the same as acceptance. The article had been in planning for 6 weeks. She hadn't gone to the press directly. She was too careful for that. She had let things flow through intermediaries, through a friend of a friend who knew a gossip editor, through carefully selected sources close to the family who happened to be people she'd cultivated over years of social maneuvering. The photo of Isabella had come from a mutual acquaintance's Instagram, something public, something findable if you were looking. She had not expected it to feel the way it felt, watching the comment count climb. She had told herself it was justice, correction, a restoration of the correct order of things. But sitting in her penthouse on that Tuesday morning, the city spread silver and indifferent below her, the coffee cooling in her hand, she found herself thinking about something she hadn't anticipated thinking about.
Clara.
The little girl's face on the hallway floor. The way she'd looked up when Adrian walked in, not with relief, not with the calculated appeal of a child who understood what was happening, but with simple, uncomplicated recognition. A person she knew, a person who felt safe.
Hi.
One word. And Adrian's face had done something that Vanessa realized, sitting now in her 50-second floor silence. She had never once made it do in 8 months of engagement. She pushed the thought away. She had a plan. The article was phase 1. Phase 2 involved a conversation she'd arranged with a journalist she trusted, a longer piece, more personal, her side of the story. The angle was sympathetic, a woman blindsided, a relationship undermined, questions about judgment and influence. It wouldn't destroy Adrian. She didn't want to destroy him. She wanted to reframe things. She wanted the world to look at Isabella and see what she tried to make her household see, someone who didn't belong. Someone who had taken something that wasn't hers. She was reaching for her phone to confirm the interview time when it rang. She didn't recognize the number. She almost didn't answer. Then something made her pick up. Ms. Duca. The voice was a woman's.
Calm.
Professional. Yes. My name is Catherine Moore. I'm the senior editor at the Hartford Investigative Journal. I'm calling because we've been made aware of a story, and before we run it, we wanted to give you the opportunity to comment. Vanessa's hand tightened slightly on the phone. What story? A pause. Our reporter has spoken with 3 former household staff members from your family's home in Boston, from the years 2015 through 2019. We also have testimony from 2 former personal assistants. Another pause. The accounts are consistent with each other, and they're consistent with what was observed at the Cole estate earlier this year. The city below Vanessa's window kept moving. Taxis, pedestrians, other people's ordinary Tuesdays. I don't know what you think you have, Vanessa began. We have quite a lot, Ms. Duca, Catherine Moore said simply. The question is whether you'd like to provide a statement before publication. Vanessa stood up, walked to the window. The glass was cool against the morning. Who commissioned this story? She asked. We don't disclose that. But I can tell you that the testimony came to us voluntarily. Every source reached out to us. A beat. It turns out you left quite an impression on a number of people over the years. Vanessa said nothing. Ms. Duca, would you like to make a statement? The comment count on the article about Isabella was still climbing somewhere on her phone screen. She could feel it without looking. All those words. Gold digger. Poor Vanessa. She had built this so carefully. No comment, she said, and ended the call. She stood at the window for a long time after that. Below, the city moved without her. It was Rosa who saw it first. Not the article. Rosa had known about the article since morning and had made the executive decision, with the authority of a woman who had run kitchens through harder things than gossip, to say nothing until she had to. But this was different. This was the comment section on a video someone had posted, a commentary channel that had taken the original gossip article and turned it into a 10-minute video complete with screenshots and what the creator called a deep dive. Rosa had been watching it on her phone in the pantry, door half closed, when she heard the small footsteps and looked up to find Clara standing in the pantry doorway with the direct, unhurried gaze of a child who knows she has found something interesting. "Whatcha watching?" Clara asked. Rosa locked her phone with a speed that was frankly suspicious. "A cooking video," Rosa said. Clara looked at her for a long moment with those dark, reading eyes. "It didn't sound like a cooking video," she said. "It was a very dramatic recipe," Rosa said. Clara considered this. "Then, was it about us?" Rosa opened her mouth, closed it. "I heard your name," Clara said simply. "And Mama's name. And Adrian's name." And that was the thing about Clara. She never caught you lying slowly. She caught you before you even finished the attempt. Rosa put her phone in her apron pocket and crouched down to Clara's level. She had 3 nieces and 2 nephews, and she'd had this kind of conversation before, the kind where a child asks a question that only has answers that are too heavy for small shoulders. "Some people," Rosa said carefully, "are saying some things that aren't true." "About Mama?" "About your Mama and Adrian, yes." Clara was quiet for a moment. "Why?" "Because sometimes people say untrue things when they're angry, or when they're sad, or when they want something they can't have anymore." Clara processed this with the careful, internal seriousness she brought to all important information. "Is Mama sad?" she asked. "Your Mama is strong," Rosa said. "Very strong." "I know," Clara said. "But is she sad?" Rosa looked at this small, impossible child. "A little bit," she admitted. "But she doesn't want you to worry." "I'm not worried," Clara said. "I just want to know." She turned and walked back toward the kitchen with the purposeful steps of someone who had gathered the information they needed and was now formulating a plan. Rosa followed her. Isabella was at the kitchen table, laptop open, phone face down, a mug of tea she hadn't touched in 20 minutes sitting beside her. She was composing an email and deleting it and composing it again, the cursor blinking at the end of a sentence that had been written and rewritten 4 times. She looked up when Clara came in. "Hey, Bug. I know about the people saying untrue things," Clara announced. Isabella looked at Rosa over Clara's head. Rosa mouthed sorry, with profound sincerity. "Come here," Isabella said. She patted the chair beside her. Clara climbed into it with the efficiency of a small person who has climbed into chairs all her life. She settled, pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them, and looked at Isabella with the expression she used for serious conversations, fully present, fully open. "What did you hear?" Isabella asked. "Rosa said people are saying untrue things about you and Adrian because they're angry." "That's right." "Is it because of a lady?" Isabella paused. "What lady?" "The mean one," Clara said. "With the juice." She hadn't said Vanessa's name in months. Isabella hadn't realized, until this moment, that Clara had never actually forgotten her, had simply filed her away in the category that small children keep for things that scared them, present, understood, not spoken. "Yes," Isabella said. "It might be because of her." Clara was quiet for a moment. Outside the kitchen window, the amber maple tree moved gently in the morning breeze, its changed outfit brilliant in the pale autumn light. "Mama," Clara said. "Yeah." "When someone says something untrue about you," she paused, working through it. "Does it still hurt? Even if it's not true?" Isabella looked at her daughter, 3.5 years old, wearing an oversized sweatshirt that belonged to the man who had colored inside a cartoon tree with a green crayon on a Tuesday morning in April because a small person had handed him a crayon and told him to press harder. "Yes," Isabella said honestly. "Sometimes it still hurts." Clara nodded slowly, absorbing this. Then she uncurled herself from the chair, stepped down, walked around the table, and pressed herself against Isabella's side, wrapping both arms around her waist in the particular way that small children hug, fully, completely, holding nothing back. Isabella closed her eyes. "Held on." "I know it's true," Clara said into her side, her voice small and clear and entirely certain. "I know you're good. And Adrian knows. And Rosa knows. And Marcus knows." A pause. "And I know." Isabella pressed her face against the top of Clara's dark curls. Breathed in. The kitchen was warm. The tree outside was amber and gold and brilliant. And somewhere in the city, things were moving that Clara didn't know about yet. Reporters and boardrooms and old testimonies surfacing like things that had always been waiting underwater. But in this kitchen, at this moment, Clara's arms were around her mother. And it was enough. It was more than enough. When Adrian's car pulled into the driveway 2 hours later, Clara was the first to hear it. She slid off her chair, crossed the kitchen in 7 running steps, threw open the back door, and launched herself at him the moment he came through the gate with a full-body commitment of a child who has been waiting to give someone a piece of important news. He caught her. He always caught her. "I told Mama," Clara said, her face very close to his, hands cupping his jaw the way she did when she needed his complete attention. "I told her I know it's true." Adrian looked at her, then past her, at Isabella standing in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, leaning against the frame. "What did she say?" he asked Clara. Clara considered. "She cried a little, but the good kind." He nodded seriously. "There's a good kind?" "Rosa says yes." Clara looked to Rosa for confirmation. "Absolutely yes," Rosa confirmed from the stove. Adrian looked back at Isabella. She was watching him with an expression he had learned to read over the summer, the one that meant she was deciding whether to trust something, running her careful, honest eyes over it looking for cracks. He held her gaze. "Let her look." "Come inside," Isabella said finally, stepping back to let him through. "We need to talk." They sat at the kitchen table. Clara was in the living room with Rosa, engaged in a project that appeared to involve every crayon she owned and a piece of paper the size of a small tablecloth. They could hear her narrating it to herself softly, that private, steady monologue that children keep when they're absorbed in making something. Adrian had made the tea this time. Isabella watched him move around her kitchen. Their kitchen, it had become their kitchen somewhere around June, and thought about what it was like to have someone in a space with you who fit there without effort.
He sat down.
Put both mugs on the table. Marcus found out, he said. Who gave them the photo? A woman named Diane Portis. She worked for Vanessa's family years ago. Kept in touch. He paused. But there's more. He told her about the call. About Catherine Moore from the Hartford Investigative Journal. About the former staff members, 5 of them across 3 households, spanning nearly a decade. Accounts that described, consistently and in detail, a pattern that anyone who had spent 3 months in the Cole Estate marble hallway would recognize immediately. Cleaning tasks assigned as punishment. Children made to perform adult work. The slow, systematic humiliation of people who had no safe recourse. Isabella listened without interrupting. The kitchen clock counted off seconds above the stove. From the living room came the soft sound of Clara adding narration to whatever she was creating. Did you know? Isabella asked. Before today? About the pattern?
No. He was direct.
I knew she was difficult. I knew she had exacting standards. I told myself that was a personality trait, not I didn't see what I should have seen. It's easy not to see things that are inconvenient, Isabella said. Not unkindly. I know. A pause. I'm not making excuses. I'm telling you the truth. She looked at him. I know you are. The tea steamed between them. Outside, the amber maple tree moved in the October breeze, and the kitchen light was warm and steady, the same kitchen light that had been warm and steady through the whole strange summer of their becoming something, a household, a unit, a family assembled sideways and without a blueprint. The Journal is running the story, Adrian said. Catherine Moore is going to contact me for comment today. I'm going to give one. What are you going to say? He was quiet for a moment. The truth. Exactly what happened. In this house. What I walked into. What I saw. A pause. What she did to Clara. Isabella's hands tightened around her mug. Clara's 3, she said carefully. I won't use her name. I won't describe her specifically. Just what happened. That a child was involved. That was the reason. He met her eyes. People need to understand it wasn't about you and me. It wasn't about optics or class or any of what that article implied. It was about a little girl on a cold marble floor. Isabella looked at him for a long time. You don't have to do this for me, she said. I'm not doing it for you, he said simply. I'm doing it because it's true. And because he paused, choosing the way he always chose his words when they mattered. Because there are 5 other people out there who had no one to walk through a door at the right moment. And if this story runs, some of them might feel less alone in what happened to them. The kitchen was very quiet. Isabella thought about a 10-month-old Clara with a fever, about a paper bag from a pharmacy. I didn't know what kind. I got all of them just in case. She thought about a green crayon and a cartoon tree, and you have to press harder. She thought about a child asking, "Are you our family?" now with her eyes already closing. She thought about this man who had no template for the life he was building here. No reference point. No blueprint. Just the honest instinct of someone who had lived in beautiful, hollow rooms for too long and had recognized, when he found them, what warmth actually felt like. Okay, she said. He nodded. Then she said, but I want to give a statement too. He looked up. It's my story, Isabella said. Mine and Clara's. I don't want it told around us. She paused. I want to tell it myself. Something moved through his expression, respect and something deeper and quieter that had no clean name. Then we'll tell it together, he said. From the living room, Clara appeared in the doorway holding a large piece of paper covered edge to edge in crayon. Done, she announced. She crossed the kitchen and set it on the table between them with the formality of presenting an important document. It was a drawing of the house. There was the maple tree, unmistakably amber, lovingly colored with approximately 11 different yellows. There was what appeared to be Rosa at the stove, identifiable by the large spoon. There was Marcus next to what Clara had labeled the car in careful crooked letters. And in the center of the drawing, around a small round shape that was clearly meant to be the kitchen table, were 3 figures. One tall one on the left, one tall one on the right, one small one in the middle holding both their hands. Under the small one, in letters Clara had written herself, it said, U.S. Adrian looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at Isabella. She was already looking at him. Yeah, he said quietly. That's exactly right. The article ran on a Thursday, not the gossip piece that had already faded the way gossip pieces fade when they have no foundation. The comments had moved on to other targets within 48 hours, the way internet attention moves, hungry and short-sighted and quickly redirected. The article that ran on Thursday was different. It appeared first in the Hartford Investigative Journal under the headline, A Pattern of Behavior. Former staff speak out about socialite Vanessa Duca and one billionaire responds. It was long. It was careful. It was the kind of journalism that takes 6 weeks to build because every sentence carries weight and the writer knows it. Catherine Moore had spent those 6 weeks talking to people. Former housekeepers, personal assistants, a nanny who had worked for a family friend of the Ducas and had quietly left after 3 months, citing unspecified difficult working conditions in her resignation letter, which she had kept a copy of. Each account was different in its details and identical in its shape. The mechanism of it, the slow normalization, the use of authority not to lead but to diminish. One former assistant had said, in language the article quoted directly, she never shouted. That was the thing. She was always perfectly calm, and somehow that made it worse. Isabella read the article sitting at the kitchen table on a Thursday morning while Clara was in the garden helping Marcus identify which tools the Roses would need before winter. She read it start to finish slowly, the way she read things that mattered. Her own words were in the middle of it, in a short section titled The Cole Household. She had written her own statement, had sat at this same table 2 nights ago with Adrian beside her and written it herself, without help, in the language she actually used. Not polished, not lawyered, just true. She had written about arriving at this house 2 years ago with an 8-month-old and trembling hands. About 2 years of being treated with dignity by an employer who had shown up at her door with 3 different brands of baby fever reducer because he hadn't known which kind. She had written about what changed when Vanessa arrived. The small erosions, the requests that grew, the mourning in the hallway. She had not written Clara's name. She had described a child, 3 years old, on cold marble, and what it had looked like, and what it had felt like to be beside her and not be able to stop it. She had ended with a single paragraph. I am not a complicated story. I am a mother who needed a job and found a good one, and I worked hard and kept my head down and loved my daughter and was lucky enough to work for a man who walked in at the right moment. That's the whole truth. Anyone who finds that story suspicious is looking for something that isn't there, and I'm not interested in convincing them. I know what happened in that hallway. My daughter knows. And the man who walked in and saw it made a decision based on what he saw. That's the kind of person he is. That's the story. Below her statement, Adrian's response was shorter. He had written it himself, too, refused his PR team's offer to draft something, sat at the kitchen table at 11 p.m. with his sleeves rolled up and written it in 20 minutes with the decisive speed of a person who knows exactly what they want to say. He had described what he saw when he walked through his front door on that March morning. He had not softened it. He had not used diplomatic language or corporate measured tone. He had written it the way he would have described it to someone he trusted, plainly, specifically. He wrote about the red hands, the thin cotton dress in the air conditioning, the face of a child who had learned not to cry because crying made things worse. He wrote, I am a person who has run a company for 15 years. I have made decisions about resources and structures and hundreds of people's livelihoods. I have sat across from adversaries in negotiations and made hard calls when they needed to be made. I ended my engagement because I walked into my house and saw a toddler being used as a cleaning instrument by the woman I was going to marry. There is no version of that where I make a different decision. There is nothing complicated about it. He had ended with one line. The people who worked in that house deserved better. All of them. Isabella read it twice. She had read the draft 2 nights ago, but it hit differently in print, formatted and permanent and public in a way that drafts never quite were. Her phone had been buzzing since 7 this morning. She'd put it face down after the 5th message. There would be time for all of that later. The messages from people she knew and some she didn't. The journalists who wanted follow-up. The noise of public opinion reshaping itself like sand after a wave. Later. Right now, she was sitting at the kitchen table with her tea, listening through the window to Clara in the garden. She could hear the small voice giving Marcus detailed instructions about something, the exact particular cadence of her daughter's authority, fully committed, thoroughly convinced of her own correctness, occasionally wrong but never uncertain. Rosa appeared from the pantry with a bowl of something, took one look at Isabella's face, and set the bowl down. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," Isabella said. "I think I really am." Rosa looked at her for a moment. Then she said, "Good. Because I made something with cinnamon and I need someone to eat it." Isabella laughed. Outside, Clara informed Marcus that the roses should be arranged differently. Marcus, who had been tending these roses for 9 years, said, "I see your point, Clara," with complete seriousness. The morning moved on. November arrived and the coal estate let it. The maple tree had finished its brilliant performance and gone quiet, its branches clean and dark against the pale November sky. Clara had mourned the leaves for exactly one morning, standing at the kitchen window with her cereal going soft again, saying, it took its outfit off, with the solemnity of someone watching the end of something beautiful. Then she had gone outside, collected a handful of the fallen leaves before Marcus raked them, and pressed them inside a book in her room. For later, she explained to no one in particular. The estate was different in November. Smaller, somehow, in the way that buildings become smaller when the world outside them turns cold, the warmth inside growing more deliberate, more felt. Rosa had started making soup. Large batches on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, filling the kitchen with a smell that meant something that had no single word for it, safety, perhaps, or the feeling of a door closing against cold air. Clara had appointed herself official taster with no formal process and significant enthusiasm. Rosa accepted the appointment. Marcus had winterized the garden with Clara supervising from a blanket on the garden bench, wrapped in a coat 3 sizes too big, issuing commentary and periodic encouragement. Good job, Marcus. That one looks cold. Don't forget the yellow ones. Never, Marcus said. Things had settled in the weeks after the article. Not immediately. There had been noise first, the kind of media attention that surrounded any story involving a billionaire, and a reversal of public narrative. Vanessa's planned interview had quietly failed to materialize. The journalist she'd been working with had pulled out, had read the Hartford piece, and made a professional decision about where she wanted her name. Vanessa herself had not issued a public response. Her social media had gone quiet. Her penthouse was Isabella had heard through someone who knew someone now listed. The 5 former staff members had spoken to lawyers. There were conversations happening in rooms Isabella wasn't part of and didn't need to be. It would move at its own pace. What mattered was that it was moving. What mattered was here. On a Friday evening in the 2nd week of November, Adrian came home to find the kitchen transformed. Not dramatically, not in any way that required explanation. But Clara had decided, with the complete authority she brought to aesthetic decisions, that the kitchen needed the special candles for dinner tonight. This meant the good candlesticks that lived on the high shelf, the ones Rosa had bought years ago and brought out for exactly no previous occasion. Clara had supervised their installation on the kitchen table with the intensity of a set designer opening night. She had also assembled a centerpiece. It involved 3 of her pressed maple leaves, a pinecone Marcus had given her, and what appeared to be a small clay figure she had made at the kitchen table the previous Tuesday, using air-dry clay that Rosa had materialized from somewhere. The figure was ambiguous in form, but Clara had identified it as the house. Rosa had made pasta, the good kind, complicated, with herbs from the kitchen garden that had managed to survive into November through what Rosa called stubbornness and Clara called bravery. When Adrian walked through the back door, he stopped in the kitchen entrance the way he always stopped, taking the room in before entering it, the old habit of a man who had spent years arriving home to houses that were impressive and empty. "You're late," Clara said. She was standing on her chair, adjusting a candle with grave concentration. Traffic was bad. Again, the city doesn't know you're waiting. Clara considered whether this was an acceptable explanation. "Sit down," she decided. "We're having the special dinner." "What's the occasion?" Clara looked at him as though this were a simple question with a simple answer. "It's Friday," she said, "and we're all here." He sat down. The dinner began the way their dinners always began, a little loud, a little warm, the candles wavering in the small kitchen drafts, Clara narrating the soup with the thoroughness of someone who had been present for its creation and felt this deserved acknowledgement. Rosa appeared and disappeared. Marcus knocked on the kitchen door to retrieve something he'd left and was invited to stay and did, sitting at the corner of the table and eating a bowl of pasta and getting into an extended discussion with Clara about whether pine cones were more beautiful in November or December. He argued December. She argued November. Neither conceded. And Isabella, watching all of it, the candles and the pressed leaves and the clay house and the people around this table who had each arrived here by separate roads through separate difficulties and had, without planning it, ended up in the same warm room, felt something settle in her chest that she hadn't known was still unsettled. Not relief. Not just relief. Something quieter and more permanent. The feeling of a door that had been open for a long time, finally, gently, closing against the cold. After dinner, after Marcus had gone and Rosa had made tea and disappeared tactfully, after Clara had been convinced, through delicate negotiation, that bedtime was a reasonable and even wise idea, Isabella sat beside Adrian on the porch swing. It was cold. She had a blanket. He had his coat. The estate lay quiet around them, the dark garden silver under a November moon. Somewhere in the bare branches of the maple tree, wind moved. "She pressed those leaves," Isabella said. "Did you know that? She has them in a book in her room." "For later," Adrian said. "She told you." "She told me everything. She's been giving me updates on the leaves since October." Isabella smiled at the garden. "She brief you on the pinecone too?" "Thoroughly." They were quiet together for a moment. The easy quiet of people who had gotten used to each other's silences. Who had learned that not every moment needed to be filled. "I've been thinking," Adrian said. "About." He was quiet for a beat, choosing the way he chose. "About what this is. What I want it to be." Isabella looked at him. "I don't want to rush anything," he said carefully. "I know that. I know where we are, and I know it's been a year, and I know you're careful. You should be careful for her sake, for yours. I'm not asking anything tonight." He paused. "I just want you to know that I know what this is. I know what I want, and I'm not going anywhere." The November air was cold and still and honest. "I know," Isabella said. "Yeah. I've known for a while," she said quietly. "I was just waiting to be sure you did." He looked at her then, and she looked back. In the amber candlelight still spilling faintly through the kitchen window, her face was warm and real and entirely unguarded, and he thought about marble hallways and cold floors and the way a house can hold cruelty inside it and look exactly the same from the outside. He thought about what it had taken for this woman to trust anything in this building, what it had taken to stay, what it had cost her, quietly, every day of those 3 months. He thought about a little girl with pressed leaves in a book for later. He reached across and took her hand. She turned it over, held on. Their word, their gesture, load-bearing and simple and entirely enough. Above them, the November sky was wide and dark and full of stars that had been there all along, obscured sometimes by weather and light pollution and all the ordinary things that block the view. But always there. Always there. Inside, on the kitchen table, the candles burned down slowly in the quiet dark. The maple leaves and the pine cone and the small clay house Clara had made sat at the center. The pasta bowls were empty. The tea had gone cold. And the kitchen, that warm amber kitchen that had seen fear and then seen it leave, that had heard real laughter return to a house that had forgotten it, held the night around it the way good homes hold everything, steadily, warmly, without letting go. Clara slept with her pressed sleeves in a book 2 floors up, arms around a stuffed bear named after a cloud she claimed to have seen from the kitchen window in August. And on the porch swing, 2 people held hands in the November dark and didn't need to say anything else. Because some things, when they're finally real, don't need words. They just need time. And they had time. They had all the time in the world. If this story moved you, drop your country in the comments and tell us what part stayed with you. And if you haven't seen part 1 yet, it's linked in the description. Every story has a beginning. Theirs started on a cold marble floor and ended here,